Unsurprisingly, I am going to talk about a topic that I'm sure many of you will be partially excited about. Many of you will be maybe intimidated, and I'm sure some of you are fed up of hearing about AI. So, what is the truth in all of this? Are we going through one of the most profound technological movements of humanity, or are we overhyping these things? Well, the honest answer is, I don't know. And anyone that claims with certainty to have the answers, they either have self-interest, they're either lying, or they're full of shit. I will start at a very important moment, the moment that ushered what many call the generative AI era. And that started with ChatGPT. And probably similar to most of you, the first time I used ChatGPT was ChatGPT 3.5. And I remember thinking, oh wow, this is interesting. It wasn't perfect. There was a little bit of latency. There was a lot of inaccuracies, hallucinations. But I started to see how it could influence my work. I started to see how it would influence my personal life, and I certainly started to see how it could change industry. And there was a comment going back about 2.5 years now that kind of embodied this technology moment for all of us, and I truly loved it. I think it encapsulated it perfectly. It came from the chief creative officer at Accenture, and he said, mediocrity is free to everyone. People, we have to step up. The floor got raised. And I think that's how we all felt when we were first introduced to LLMs through ChatGPT. And obviously, a lot has happened since then. And one of the next biggest breakthroughs was the advancement of modalities. And what do I mean by that? So when we first interfaced with ChatGPT, it could read and write. And interestingly, over time, now LLMs can read, write, they can listen, speak, they can see, hear. And they can do this because fundamentally, this technology is built on language. Language is ubiquitous, not just across territories, but across everything. Code is a language. DNA is a language. So once we had a breakthrough in one field, we had a breakthrough across all fields, and this ultimately acted as a tremendous accelerator for innovation. And this was one of the first moments where I started to get intimidated by the technology, not because I believed it was going to eradicate and be better than me at everything, but my whole relationship with computers had been deterministic. Computers, as far as I knew them, were ones and zeros. They were binary. They were yes, they were no. They were good at the rational stuff. And now we enter an era moving from deterministic outcomes to probabilistic. And when you deep it for a second, that is profound. In a single ask, we have endless possibilities. So what's the outcome? Well, we end up in this world where we now have a lot of applications and tools to support us in everything that we do. And I mentioned before that the floor got raised. So we have a world on one hand where AI meets no effort. You get the median of humanity. You get a basic outcome. And that basic outcome is increasingly getting better. And when I use AI, I copy a prompt that was a trend, and I do vain things like turn myself into an action figure. However, there is this second movement. AI meets effort and mastery. You can do magic things. And what do I mean by that? I mean the photographer that decided to learn how to use Midjourney. And they know exactly what angle they want, what camera lens, how to space, how to frame photography. And they're able to do unthinkable things. And I want to give you a wonderful example right here. Everything you see there is AI generated. To give you a little bit of context, that was about $500 of token usage. That was 6 applications and a profound individual that spent about 80 hours editing that. And if you consider in traditional production techniques, producing something of that nature, directionally about $250,000. And this is just in the advertising industry. This is across all industries. Okay, so we now have a technology moment through the introduction of LLMs. LLMs now work across modalities, which means the applications are increasing across industry. The question becomes, are models getting smarter? Are they achieving actual intelligence? Well, one of the biggest breakthroughs in AI was moving from something called single-shot prompting to chain of thought reasoning. And the best example that I can give to you guys is if I said to you, write me a story. You don't get an opportunity to think, you can't stop, you can't research, you can't speak to anyone else. Even the most capable writers amongst us would probably write garbage. And that's ultimately how we were interfacing with AI. Well, now AI stops, it reasons, it validates, it sources reference. It actually does all the aspects of reasoning and thinking. And reasoning is incredibly important, not just for intellectual pursuits, but for creative pursuits. Okay, so we've come a long way, and what I've described there is about 3 years, which still really blows my mind. Where are we going next? Well, some of you will have heard the term agentic. And agentic often gets confused with automation. They are not the same thing. And I'll give you my common definition of an agent and agentic. An agent is simply an AI application that is capable of completing a task independently. And that AI agent may be trained to do something very, very well, one specific thing. Agentic is multiple agents working together to complete seemingly more complex tasks. So what is the outcome of agents being introduced? Well, it's a really important one, and I want you to think about this. We are now moving from this technology being a passive contributor to now an active contributor in our work. So when I say passive, I mean historically, I would go to an application and I would say, I need X, Y, and Z. Can you help me? Well, now we're moving to an era where AI can contribute to you as an individual, and more importantly, it can contribute to you as a team. And this is important in business for a number of reasons. If I said to you, what was the best piece of work that you ever produced? Unless you were a narcissist, you wouldn't say, I did it on my own. It was usually a byproduct of a team working together. Well, now individuals have speed, they have advantages, they have a productivity multiplier. They can unlock new capabilities they didn't think were imaginable just a few years ago. And then you consider the path that we are on, the accelerated path, this exponential curve that people talk about. Well, what's the conclusion? Well, I have some good news and I have some bad news. I'll start with the bad news because we may as well get it out of the way. If you are not very capable, and if you are not good at your job, you're fucked. Mediocre does not cut it anymore. The world will be very unforgiving for those that don't lean into technology and don't develop their skills. But in more positive news, if you are good at your job, the future truly belongs to you. I want you to deep this for a second. Computers now speak in our language. They speak in natural language. We don't just have no or low-code solutions. We can bend the digital world around us. So what does this mean? If you're analytical, if you're a left brain, but you maybe are not the most creative person in the world, well, you have a co-pilot that can be anything you want it to be to fill in your flaws. If you're an artist, if you're a creative, if you've got a wonderful imagination but no structure, you now have AI that acts as a superpower. And in the real world, this means designers, stop complaining about your engineers and your developers. You don't need them. Developers, stop complaining about your artists and your designers. You don't need them. Managers, you don't need people. Yeah, I'm joking. You absolutely do need people. But I do believe if you have the right attitude and you are optimistic, and that's all we can be in this about the technology, and take agency, you have superpowers. And I truly believe that. It is easier than ever to create anything, from content to business, but that comes at a cost. There's an irony that it's harder than ever to stand out. So how do you stand out in your careers, in your business, in your marketing efforts? I'm going to give you 3 areas to focus on where technology can help you today: inspiration, leverage, and an outlier advantage. So I'm going to start with inspiration. Can I get a raise of hands in here? Who identifies as being creative? Who thinks they're pretty creative? Okay. So half the room, a quarter of the room creative, a lot of people. So many people don't identify as creative, which is often a misconception of what creativity is. People often think of creativity as originality. It's not the same. Creativity is simply taking experiences that we all have, taking inspiration, taking things we learn and combining them in new ways. It's called combinational creativity, and we're all capable of that. Well, interestingly enough, everybody within their pockets, if you have a free application in ChatGPT, you have an AI to be anything you want it to be. You have infinite perspectives in your pocket. And why this is particularly exciting, I'll give you a quote from Ethan Mollick, a Wharton AI professor. And I think this beautifully embodies the point. The problem with being human is we are stuck in our own heads. And a lot of the bad decisions we make are either because we're drunk or the result of not having enough perspectives. That's no longer a problem. You can give an instruction, you can ask an AI to be anything that you want it to be. And that's a real foundation for taking inspiration. The second point I want to make is one of the most intimidating factors of creating everything, whether that's a business plan or content or marketing or any artistic pursuit, is the blank page. For all of you that don't identify as being a creative, the biggest barrier is usually the starting place. Well, now you can always do your 0 to 1 and get that little spark of inspiration from technology. Interestingly, I have colleagues that use the technology to help them with their inspiration. I actually have colleagues that use AI to eliminate generic ideas. But in any case, they're using technology to unlock their own creative potential. And the third thing that I believe everybody should do is start to build their inspiration knowledge base. And what do I mean by that? Well, right now, if in order to gain an edge, you need to either be exceptional at prompting or you need to be able to give very specific data points and references. And one of the things that I started to do a few years ago, I used Notion to organize my life. And there's a Chrome extension called Notion Clipper. And basically, anytime I see anything interesting on the internet, from a video to an article, I store it. I create my knowledge base. I use Notion Clipper just to organize. So when I interface with LLMs, I'm training them based on the things that I like, things that inspire me. And that's how you start to move into an area where you can gain an advantage. The second thing I want to touch on is leverage. Digital leverage. It's actually the number one thing I say to young people when they're entering their career. They say, how can I get ahead? What skills should I focus on? And I always start with digital leverage. And digital leverage in today's world comes in a few forms. The first thing I will say is you need to learn to speak the internet. The second thing, and I use this word intentionally, play with AI. And I say play because play is a different relationship to anything else. And this means experimenting. It means not taking yourself too seriously. It means joining trends when they happen. If you have a healthy, playful relationship with AI, you can start to move towards gaining digital leverage. And the third thing I will say is you have to learn to prompt. Prompting is often thought of as just speaking in natural language. And in part, it's true. However, the story doesn't end there. LLMs interpret language in a very specific way. And actually, I won't go into the specifics now, but one of the things that my organization launched recently is the world's first prompt university. And it's not like any other university, that we are working on AI professors. So these are LLMs trained for specific subject matter. But the foundational belief of Prompt University is it's a free course for people to get better at prompting, because I think it's going to be the most valuable skill well into the future. We are entering a new technology moment. And of course, you have to be willing to fail. As an organization, as an individual, a new rule book is being rewritten. And unless you are willing to fail, unless as an organization you create a culture that embodies failure, you will not succeed in the future. And that's how you gain your outlier advantages. And for me, the thing that I get most excited by is no one is bound by technical limitations. And this for me is a very human hope. Okay, to conclude, what have we learned? Most of you are very confident about your jobs. I would like to remind you, though, if you are very confident about your job, we don't need AI to do rubbish work. As humans, we are more than capable of doing that. There are two principles, energy and intelligence. All humanity is built on energy and intelligence. Energy, the cost of goods to produce everything around us, and intelligence, human ingenuity. And he said, how much will things change if one of those things goes to zero? And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me of going, okay, well, that's the foundation of enterprise, the world around us. And that was really a breakthrough. And then following that, I had the privilege of working in my previous business with a guy called Mo Galdat, who's former chief business officer at Google X. And he used to go on these eloquent rants about the scary future we have with AI. And that was a moment for me to go, much smarter people than me are preaching the impact. And I went all in at that point.
How do you build the brilliant prompt? How do you make that content that the AI gives you, like, unquestionably better than anything that you could generate on your own?
Yeah, we're in the process of unlearning some unhealthy habits. Google taught us the keyword. And when we interface with technology, we use crude keywords to describe things. We're now working with LLMs, which are, again, probabilistic. So specificity matters. You have to be really specific. I think every industry will change, but that is not new. directionally, every 75 years, about 50% of all jobs disappear. What is new is and what is probably intimidating is the pace of change. I think that's where, on one hand, the art of possible is going to exponentially increase, but we have structures and ways of working. People will typically move a little slower. So I think all industries will be affected, not just creative, some more than others. A lot of people believe physical industries will be the least affected. So plumbing, certain aspects of engineering, etc. If you're an enterprise organization, I think a really healthy rule universally is 70% of what you do is what you know to work. 20% of what you do is what you would call experimentation. So these are new projects that you have maybe a little more degree of certainty. And then 10% of what you do should be moonshots. These are uncorrelated things that are just wildly, where you really throw out all your preconceptions and your rule books and how things are done. And you probably should isolate that team and create. So in my past business, we had a head of failure. We had a head of experimentation. We actually made roles for someone to go and break things and disrupt ourselves.
I'm really curious what the job description for head of failure is.
Is go round and try and break things.
That's a good idea. I don't know if any of you take the chance on having or naming someone from your team head of failure. Just write us and let us know how that went. And because we're already a bit over at the time, I'll just drop one more question that has more to do with us as humans navigating the next stages of industrial revolution, next stages of humanity. We're all chasing attention. I think 90% of the things that we're doing online is just trying to be unforgettable, whether it's on LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok. Yet the more we move, things tend to be or get to be more fleeting, like virality is a second. What do we need as humanity? Like social media is no longer social. What do we actually crave, or what will we need in the next decade or so?
I don't think people change that much. The world around us clearly is changing. We all want the same things. We want a sense of belonging. In your professional work, you want to know that your effort is A, rewarded, but B, is worthwhile. And the interesting thing about being in business today, a lot of things are change, and change presents opportunity. So I think there's going to be a lot of exciting moments for people. And then the third thing is connection. I do believe as more and more of our lives are filled with technology, you will have the counter movement. And that's why I'm big on community, run clubs, activities, yoga, football clubs. I think things to bond us. So if you're a business and you talk about the 10% of things that you may not do, maybe that's something completely different to your business. Maybe that's thinking about how you bring people together. Events like this, I think, will be increasingly important in the future.
To try to be as present and authentic in your attempt to build connection and the community around, be it a personal brand.
Those things will not change.